Here we go. Namaste. My name's Amber Jean, and welcome to our live today. I want to thank everybody for joining. And if you have any questions or you want to DM me after the live, feel free to message me or DM me anytime. Okay, we're also live on Instagram today. And today, our topic is a little bit more sensitive topic for me. I feel a calling to talk about my personal history with rocket yoga and see how the conversation goes. So, my personal history with rocket yoga began in 1999. My teacher, Indu, had started instructing rocket here in Cincinnati. And I was taking those classes before I attended my yoga teacher training in May of 2000. And so in May of 2000, when I traveled to San Francisco, this was when I really got to see firsthand how the rocket was being taught in San Francisco. And Larry Schultz's rocket classes started off very basic. They started off with playing around with Ashtanga yoga sequences and slowly building strength within the students and in the classes. Okay. And so, what I witnessed was in the early days of Rocket, even Rocket 2, there was often perhaps just one set of abdominals. And then there was one time designated for jumping into handstand practice. And then a few years would go by, and I slowly saw the rocket evolve. So a couple years would go by, and I would go to San Francisco, and then Larry started instructing 3 sets of abdominals and 3 handstands. And then a few years would go by and I would go back to San Francisco and I traveled there regularly for 11 years. The last year and a half we were in Sonoma up north. And anyhow, we by the end by after I had been traveling in the early by the time it got to be the 2008 2007s, Larry Schultz was adding 5 handstands and 5 sets of abdominals. So there was a lot of cross training that was going on in these rocket classes. Thanks for joining the live. Let me know if you have any questions. Feel free to jump in the chat. Today we're talking about my personal history with rocket yoga. And there's some people out there that they don't probably really want me talking that much because I witnessed a lot. Okay. I witnessed the rocket from the very innocence of when it was taught at It's Yoga San Francisco to the sharing it with the franchise studios to Larry Schultz passing and people wanting to take control and be the big alphas of the rocket. Okay. So anyhow, so my personal history is I adopted Rocket as my main practice. I had been practicing primary series when I first started to practice yoga, but then after a while, I realized that primary series wasn't really getting me where I needed to go. And I wanted to work on those strength moves and I wanted to work on my flexibility every practice. So I quickly adopted the rocket practice as my main practice when I was not in San Francisco. And I became a rocket enthusiast. I stuck with a practice that many people would say was too challenging. Many people watered down their teachings after taking teacher training with Larry Schultz. And many people stopped teaching yoga altogether. And yes, and all the inversion practice, Paul Avives, is the inversion practice was another big aspect of what drew me to Rocket is that we were able to access and practice these inversions on a day-to-day basis. And so, through myself becoming a rocket enthusiast, started becoming a rocket enthusiast when Larry Schultz was alive. And so, almost every day, I was practicing rocket, talking about rocket, calling Larry Schultz on the phone, instructing rocket at my studio. And really, I really was kind of starting to become a cheerleader for Rocket. But when Larry Schultz left his body in 2011, that was when I really became a huge cheerleader for the Rocket. It was my passion, it was my life. I created a whole studio based around the Larry Schultz rocket system with Larry's blessing. Before Larry passed, he had also blessed me to facilitate rocket yoga teacher trainings. And so that's what I thought, his wishes were. Okay. His wishes were that his students and me specifically would continue to teach rocket. And that was really when my personal relationship with Rocket became a lot about not just Rocket, but Larry Schultz's legacy. And I guess I felt like nobody else in the community was doing that much for the legacy. So I started to work on that. And, that's not necessarily a normal grief response. Thank you for enjoying my videos. And thanks for the feedback of enjoying the shoulder stand plow and inverted bicycles. There's so many things that you can do when you're upside down in your hips that you can't necessarily do when your feet are on the floor. And so that's when the rocket practices become really fun, and that's also why I've expanded my teaching into these Emerson vinyasa practices. Mostly the Emerson's vinyasa practice was born out of change and transformation. Because when Larry passed in 2011, I had already been teaching rocket for 11 years. Okay. And later on, I found out that there was trademark issues on Rocket after I had already been teaching Rocket for 15 plus years. Now I've been instructing Rocket for over 20 years. And so I formed a very personal relationship with Rocket almost to a fault. Okay. And so this is part of the Emerson's evolution is being careful about creating an identity for ourselves by what we do. And yes, I love Rocket. Yes, I love instructing yoga, but I have so many more facets to my teaching than just Rocket. Okay. And so by forming this, having this very close relationship to Rocket, I spent 20 years of my life, and especially when Larry Schultz passed, I made a commitment to myself that I would do something for Rocket every single day. And what that means is that I would practice Rocket. I would post about Rocket. I would offer free tutorials, yada, 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 blah, 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 blah. Okay. And, you know, and going through that such a personal experience and having to that's wonderful. You've been doing yoga over 20 years. And yes, I have done the inverted bicycle as this is a long practice. Okay. And so when things start to change in your body, we need to change our practice. And so from practicing Rocket and teaching Rocket and literally got a little itch there, literally doing everything for Rocket for 20 years, I realized that there has to be some evolution. There has to be some change because if I have to go around and teach Rocket 1 or Rocket 2 every single day, it's too much. I've already done it. I've already instructed Rocket 1 and Rocket 2 for 20 years. I already instructed Rocket 1 and Rocket 2 in San Francisco. And I already wrote the manuals for Rocket teacher training. And so in the Emersons, Rocket is a big part, is a chapter. It's just one chapter, but there's a lot of other chapters that are going into the Emersons. And yes, I'll be happy to do some more inversion videos. I know everybody loves my inversion videos. I appreciate the positive feedback. So after, let's go. So anyhow, yada 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 yada. And this is, one of the more one of the more difficult topics that I can talk about is my personal relationship with Rocket because it was such an intimate relationship. And it was a relationship that was built out of love. And it was a relationship that was built out of trust. And it was a relationship that was built out of believing in something that I can't see. And anyhow, when you know everything happened and there was all this stuff that there was suddenly all of a sudden after 20 years of Rocket a trademark out on it, a lot of people came to me because they see me as the mother of Rocket or the one day the great grandmama of Rocket. And working with these people, counseling these people, and really trying to encourage everybody to follow their hearts and do what they have to do. But there comes a time where the mama has to cut the cord, and and I do work with mentoring students, mentorship programs, things like that. But because my relationship with the Rocket was so intimate and made me so vulnerable, that when things that I feel were I feel like I was possibly taken advantage of from the yoga community, and that's okay because a lot of people learned from me. A lot of people learned about, how to facilitate rocket teacher training, because I was the first one really doing that. I the first rocket training that I did was in Cincinnati, and well, I assisted a couple of Larrys, but then Larry passed, after Larry passed, I started working on pilot rocket trainings right here in Cincinnati. And I took, a lot of people that had already taken my 200-hour training through early rocket trainings, and that helped me develop my rocket manual. Was through actually the pilots. Okay, everything in yoga, you should always have pilots. You should always test things out and go through a trial phase before you launch something. And that's why these Emerson's teachings are so important, because they're based on those early rocket trainings where I was doing the actual pilot trainings. Okay. All right. So, my relationship with the rocket then grew to being invited to Nicaragua. That was one of my first international rocket trainings. And then it grew to being invited to England. That was my second international rocket training. And then things kind of took off from there. So between 2015 to 2020, I was on a rocket high and my feet didn't touch the ground. Okay. I was traveling around doing what I loved. And, and, yeah, it was a wild rocket ride, but we were going to beautiful places, and that was my original dream. My original dream was always to do rocket trainings in the most beautiful places in the world. And I've succeeded in that dream by doing rocket trainings in Costa Rica and in Nicaragua. And and it's been pretty wild over the past 5 years of kind of having to start to pivot a little bit. Mostly because my relationship with the Rockets changed. And just like your practice is going to change, and your relationship with the people in your life is going to change, my relationship with Rocket, if Rocket was a person, it's changing. And I can still obviously teach Rocket teacher training with two hands behind my back, no feet, no eyes, anything, and I can still facilitate a Rocket teacher training. I hope it never comes down to that. But anyhow, like on a day-to-day basis, what I really am teaching now at my studio is I've been building my base up here in Cincinnati. I mean, what could be better? This is my hometown. So of course I want to build it back up. And hey, thanks for joining the live, Spirit Savage. Yeah, we're doing these lives now. And, but basically what I'm teaching on a day-to-day basis is people want mixed level Emerson's. Okay. It's a bottle rocket formula. It is based in traditional Ashtanga. It is based in traditional Larry Schultz rocket, but we are layering in more of the cross training and we are doing more fun. That's right, I said fun, mixed level practices. And this is allowing my students to come and experience a lot of different ranges of movement without getting bored. And it's allowing them to get a feel for getting strong by using the wall and by using some of these cross training techniques that I have been working on for a long time. And it's allowing them to keep coming back to the mat because I'm telling you now, I am the experiment for rocket yoga. Okay. When you practice rocket yoga for 26 years straight, like I have, you don't want to practice rocket one and rocket two all the time. You want to hit these bottle rockets. You want to hit these other routines that I've been developing with the Emerson's Vinyasa and the Medicine Rocket because we need to keep our bodies healthy. And what happens is as you age, and I never thought this would happen to me, is you start to get when you're a yoga instructor for 26 years and you've also combine it with raising a family, being on your feet cooking, getting groceries in and out, all of these things, okay, that you do, you can start to create overuse issues in your joints. And so now what's happening is my rocket relationship and my history, my personal history with rocket is changing. And I have been able to travel the world teaching yoga, but it's much more than just rocket now. It's more about the Amber Jean experience of rocket and the Amber Jean experience of teaching to the masses for so long and being able to extend these teachings into the future. So this weekend we're opening up an Emerson's One training here in Cincinnati. And in Emerson's One is the original foundation that consists of sun salutations, focusing on minimum daily requirement, focusing on foundations of breath, bandha, and drishti as the way it was taught by Patabi Joyce, focusing in on the therapeutic aspects of how Krishnamacharya was teaching yoga to heal people. Okay. So we have Emerson's One going on. And this is, kind of these conversations that I want to open up more. And it's really been the biggest blessing for me is being able to do my own thing and teach my own way and not be lumped in with a group of people that are teaching rocket now because I have a unique perspective. I've been doing it longer than pretty much mostly everybody. And I've been running a rocket studio where that has been a main focus for 18 years. And I have done an immense amount of writing on rocket. Uh, and I'm doing these lives because the lives are easier than getting the writing out. I can get my verbals out faster right now. And so this is my fastest way of communication. And now, and someone just wrote with the, that someone on here, Paula, practiced with Lilius. Okay. Lilius just left her body. Okay. Lilius just left her body this past March. And, Larry Schultz left his body in 2011. We have had a whole generation of yoga instructors leave this earth that they can no longer teach verbally. They can only be spiritual spiritual people that we can look up for inspiration, people from our past that we can look up for inspiration. But we cannot now, this is a new generation. Okay. And so as the story keeps evolving, my mission is to help all of you create a stronger relationship with your yoga, no matter what you call your yoga. And remembering it is yoga, it is yoga. And, it's sometimes people say, you can just say yoga teacher training. It's yoga teacher training. Okay. And people are going to come for that teacher. Okay. Not necessarily the name of the course. And that's really, I think, what these past few years have taught me is practicing that detachment and not being attached to the name Rocket. I had a very strong identity and relationship around Rocket for so many years. And this is the biggest blessing. And I know I said this earlier, for me to be working independently and for me to be doing my own thing. Because when you're doing your own thing, and this is what I'm also encourage all of you that's also studying yoga, is make sure that you keep some autonomy with yourself, and being able to move and groove and accentuate the things that you really love in yoga and share those things with your students, whether maybe it's juicing, maybe it's nature, maybe it's being very zen. Whatever it is, those are the things that you want to offer for your students, and to get out of, only being associated with one modality. Okay. And that's why my relationship with Rocket had to change, is because it had to grow. And these cherry blossoms today, this is a lovely way to start May. And we've got these beautiful flowers back here to open up this Emerson's training this weekend. And I've been practicing a lot, really getting into, it's been 26 years. I still can do some stuff. I do work on my flexibility every day, and I also, I do all kinds of stuff. And so, sometimes I just do Pilates, sometimes I just walk. And I find that, we need to find practices that are going to take us through the aging process. Okay? And that's what we're doing. So, anyhow, we just did another half hour. This topic is very difficult for me. See, I think I forgot to press live on Instagram today. I forgot to press live on Instagram. So if you guys see this on Instagram, make sure you log into Rocket Yoga Academy on YouTube. And this was all about my personal relationship with Rocket, and that we all need to keep evolving and let our practices evolve and try new things. And this was a very difficult live for me. And if you know more about me and you know the background, and then you know how close I was to all the rocket stuff, and having to watch a whole bunch of people, you know, do their thing, and hey, good. We're getting some Rocketeers from Melania. Missing you too. Good. We're growing. We're starting to grow the lives. This is awesome. And this is the vision, is because, you know, one thing about yoga is the yoga, is the Shiva energy, is this power of destruction lending to creation, right? And the rebirth. So April, we've had Easter, that's the resurrection, right? So I did have an interesting thing on uh, my journal when I was looking at my journal last night. Is I wrote to myself 3 years ago, I want to resurrect yoga because my studio, I was completely closed for 2 or 3 years, and I was only teaching online, and I was traveling and teaching, but I didn't have a home base. And so here I am 3 years later, and I did resurrect my studio, and I had to resurrect the website and everything. And now we have a new website, and I'm starting to grow and work on that website more, which is really exciting. But these things don't happen overnight. But if you take time to reflect, and this is why the journaling process is so important. If you take time to reflect and you journal and you reflect back, then you can see your progress. Because I myself, I wrote in my journal, I'm a constant self-help living creature, a self-help book living person every day, because I'm journaling, I'm drinking tea, I'm taking hikes, I'm reading something, and sometimes, and I feel like, I can be hard on myself, thinking maybe I, should be doing more. Maybe I should be producing more, putting more videos out there, putting more of this out there, doing this, doing that, you know. But in the past 3 years, I, have all these journals where I can see my progress. And that's really cool, is wow, actually I really have come pretty far in the past 3 years. And a lot of yoga is what you don't see. So a lot of yoga is, like, you don't see what happened today for me earlier today. You just see this live. And, earlier today we had a Emerson's Vinyasa class. I would say it's kind of like a bottle rocket, but it's also a little bit more of my own creativity with my sequencing. And then, you know, kind of just letting your day unfold, And then my big surprise today is I ended up finding all these beautiful flowers. And I ended up making some flower arrangements for the studio. So you never know what's going to happen. So stay positive, everybody. Relationships change. That could be another whole lecture, is talking about relationships. And ultimately, we're all working on the one most important one, our relationship with ourselves. Okay. And hopefully all those other ones will fall into place. So I'll leave you with that, and be inspired, everybody. I wanted to talk about my relationship with the rocket, and I kind of did a lot of weaving, but yeah, that's what you do when you talk live, is you just go with it. So sending lots of blessings to everybody. Sincerely bless you, and just be thankful for the little things. Be really thankful, just for, having a table, being able to take a sip of coffee, having a phone, having a book, having some eucalyptus. This is like bringing me so much joy today. So, all right, everybody, be inspired. Namaste.